Welcome to our midweek mailbag. It is the bye week. Thankfully, mercifully, Detroit Lions are 1-4. But we are back here every Tuesday afternoon here on twitch.tv/Pride of Detroit to answer your questions live here and for your listening and viewing pleasure. My name is Jeremy Reisman. I am the producer over at Pride of Detroit. You can find me at Detroit Online on Twitter. As always, part of the midweek mailbag, we bring in our managing editor of Pride of Detroit, at Eric Schlitt with a K on Twitter. It's Eric Schlitt. How we doing, bud?
I'm all right.
Are you?
I don't feel like I'm getting enough sleep lately, and so I'm a little tired. But thus is life of a reporter in season.
Sure. And hopefully this bye week will not only give us time to rest our bones a little bit, but maybe the team needs a little bit of rest or two. And I know Dan Campbell before the Patriots game was like, this is kind of a blessing where this bye week is. Maybe even more so after the Patriots game.
I think everybody needs a break, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the fans need the break too. I mean, let's I hate going into a bye following a loss because it just lingers.
Sure.
You know what I mean? The negativity lingers, the feeling lingers. You're doing twice as much work on a game that was just heart-wrenching at times, right? And so it's challenging. It's a challenging way to have a mini vacation in season.
Right. Sure. It certainly would have been nicer to have discussed,
when is the last time they had a win ahead of a bye? Now I know they've gotten wins coming out of a bye. I mean, I can't remember. I feel like they lose every time going into a bye.
It feels like it.
It does.
That's a great question, which is what this podcast is all about, is asking questions. Typically, we're not asking them to ourselves, but
nice segue.
Maybe our live chat can answer that one from us, and we'll in turn answer questions from them, because that's what we do here. And also, if you're not able to join us live, you can always send us questions on Twitter using the hashtag AskPOD, and that's where we're going to start. David Alexander on Twitter asks us, this is a young team with a largely rookie coaching staff. Does Dan Campbell have the mental chops to turn this thing around?
I mean, we don't know, right? Because he is in his infancy of coaching, right? As a head coach anyway. And so, that was one of the things we talked about this summer, was the fact that they're only a year into, not only is the year a year into having a young roster, but it's a year into having a young coaching staff as well. So I don't know. I mean, that's the real question. Like, if they can turn this season around and stack some wins, then yeah, there's the faith is going to grow. But if they can't, then there's going to be a lot of the doubters are going to continue to increase.
Yeah, and when he says mental chops, to me that means two different things.
Okay.
In terms of him being able to kind of weather the storm mentally, in terms of like keeping his composure and keeping the locker room together, all that sort of stuff, I have 100% faith that Dan Campbell is capable of that.
Culture-wise, right? Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Like, he's not gonna lose. He's not gonna stop being him. He's not going, and same with Aaron Glenn. Like, Aaron Glenn, I thought, had a really good press conference last week where he's talking about, like, I've been through this as a player. When you give up two big touchdowns in a game, you come back and you have to keep a level head and all that. And I know how to weather that. I know how to not lose control and all that sort of stuff. And I believe him. And I believe that the coaching staff will keep it together there. The question obviously then is like, okay, but mentally, in terms of football mentality, will they be able to turn things around? And I know I've made the comparison. A lot of people are going to make the comparison to last year, right? They go into the bye, they get their butts kicked by the Eagles. They clearly need to fix the offensive side of the ball. And in a matter of a couple weeks after the bye, they do. The question is, can they make some of the same adjustments on defense? Do they have the personnel to make some of the adjustments on defense? Because like then, there were some injured players, or there's some, they got Taylor Decker back. They get Josh Reynolds. Those two things were, I think, maybe underrated ways in which They were able to turn things around on offense, outside of obviously the change in coaching structure.
Mm-hmm.
Defensively, they can get some guys back too. Like Josh Paschal looks like he's going to be ready to go in 1 or 2 weeks. You might get Kaminsky back right away. I feel less confident about maybe Romeo Okwara coming back anytime soon. But Jerry Jacobs, sure.
Mm-hmm.
But none of those feel like they have maybe necessarily as big of impact, and I don't think they're going to make any sort of coaching changes necessarily. Do you think there is a relatively good chance that something changes towards the positive, at least on the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, you can see a domino effect happening, right? Yeah. You can see when Kaminsky was available, how that changed up the front. And if you're able to get Kaminsky back and then Paschal, who's essentially in that same type of mode, then yeah, you can see the front change. And when the front changes, then everything else trickles back, right? And so I could see some changes. The pass rushers, the interior penetration, those things are necessary necessary improvements in order to see a big drastic change. And again, we've talked about this previously. As the offense gets healthier, the defense doesn't have to have the same level of jump that the offense did. Sure. Like they don't need to be a top 10 unit. They just need to be a top 24 unit, a top 20, you know what I mean? Honestly.
Yeah.
And like, if they can get out of the bottom third or near, then it's a completely different team, because when the offense is healthy and clicking, and I know that they just put up a goose egg, but you have to believe. Yeah, I think based on and when you look at Ben Johnson's history, he's pretty good at adjusting and learning. And so I know it's a relatively small sample size, but still, if you can I don't think you have to make as big of a jump, I guess is my point. Sure. Like I see there's an opportunity for improvement. If you can get that improvement, you make a little jump, and then you start to see how it affects everything, really. So, but you got to start somewhere, and you got to start making improvements, and you have to stop making mistakes, and there's a path. Yeah. It's just, can they take that road? Can they get past those obstacles? Because if they get past a handful of them, then it's the opportunity for them to become what they were in the first couple of weeks, and maybe even better, is there.
Going along with this, BW the Kid and our live Twitch audience asks, is the defense actually improved like Dan claims it was? Because he came out on Monday and said, like, sure. Listen, it was one of the first things he said is like, I thought we made steps defensively. And I think he even said something to the matter of like, we figured some things out, because obviously they made a lot of changes to the personnel, maybe a little bit to the scheme as well. What was your thought of their defensive performance against the Patriots in terms of its viability going forward?
Yeah, I thought it was better, but at the same time, I didn't think the Patriots offense is explosive. Yeah. Right. So like, it's hard to really, like, you should have gotten better against that offense. So, so I don't know. I don't know if I can definitively say that, yes, they have gotten better. I mean, they ran into even more obstacles, which was like ridiculous.
Yeah.
It was, I've never seen stuff like that. Just it's rare, yeah. When you're already down guys, and then to lose where you're having to play your nickel at free and stuff like that. Like it. So, I mean, yes, tangibly it looks like it improved, but is that sustainable? That's I don't know. Yeah. We're gonna have to find out.
I would say individually there were some promising things. Like I thought Kirby Joseph had a really good game.
Kirby's trending up.
Yeah, and he's probably going to have that position locked down. I don't know what they're going to do with the other safety position. That seems interesting, because I didn't really expect Deshaun to get benched, but when he came back after
he played well.
Yeah, he played pretty well.
He made a mistake or two, but like, he also had a pick. They've only had 2 of those.
Right.
So,
and I kind of think Mike Hughes looked okay on the outside. Which I don't think they're going to stick with that necessarily. I think he's probably going to be pretty far down on the depth chart on the outside once everyone's healthy. But I think that made sense. And I don't know. I tend to agree with Dan Campbell that the run defense looked better. But you look at the stat sheet and there's no actual evidence of that. I think if you were to like look at the amount of runs that were stopped for 1 gain or less, They probably had a
Right.
high percentage of that in that game. I
Yeah,
think they did.
Aleem instead of having like one had like 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, I think you brought up the point that I was going to bring up. Like, how much of this is real? How much of this is just playing a Patriots team that was very conservative in their approach the entire game and just not that talented? If we're being quite honest, so we'll have to see. Dallas will be an interesting challenge. They're a really strong defensive team. We don't know.
Yeah.
I guess we're probably expecting Dak to be back by then, but last time he came back from a finger injury, he was not very good. So maybe he won't be at his best. We'll see. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see with the defense. I want to be optimistic because I like this coaching staff and a lot of the things that Aaron Glenn says seems to make a lot of sense to me, but I need to see more. I need to see more. All right, let's move to a new question here. An interesting one here from Devoted to Detroit. I've seen a lot of comparisons to Matt Patricia and Jim Caldwell. Does the build of the roster affect the length of the leash the team will have with Campbell? I think he meant Campbell and Caldwell. Those teams under Jim Caldwell and Matt Patricia were built to compete. Dan Campbell was brought in for a rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, geez, with Patricia, he was taking over a team that was already successful, and then, but he was given the like he was coming in with the concept of he was completely shedding the defense, which right. So they gave him plus it was Bob Quinn's boy, right? So like he had a little bit of he had a leash there. Caldwell inheriting Schwartz's team was actually not a terrible team. But like, I think Schwartz he had melted down in that final year in a lot of different ways. But the team wasn't terrible, and Caldwell definitely elevated them, whereas, Patricia took them the wrong way. Whereas I think this situation, it's completely different in the fact that they are rebuilding everything. Yeah. It's not just one side of the ball. It's everything. And we've brought this up in the past as well. Like, you're giving the coach and the GM 5 and 6 year contracts because you're expecting it to take 3 years before you're competitive. Right. And I know we collectively as a fan base got very excited when they came out and looked very good the first 2 weeks, but this is also 5 games into year 2 of a complete rebuild. So maybe our expectations got a little too high, a little too quick.
Yeah. I think maybe it's most fair to compare it to Jim Schwartz and what he inherited, right?
Yeah.
Like he inherited
0-16.
0-16. And so he went 2-14 his first year, 6-10 the second year, and then 10-6 his third year. And then he got fired when he went 4-12 and 7-9. So regressed there. So I think we need to see a little bit more year 1 to year 2 jump like we did see with Schwartz. And listen, the Lions still have 12 games to prove that they can do that. But yeah, it is important to really point out what this regime inherited. And the answer is basically nothing, right?
I mean, yeah.
What foundational pieces did the Lions have outside of a couple guys on the offensive line?
Right. Well, I mean, you could Okudah maybe, right? I mean, that was about it. I think Tracy, Okudah, everybody else has been replaced, right? I mean, you could say Amani, but Amani's been replaced as well. It appears.
And it wasn't a case where this staff jettisoned talented players because they didn't
just
fit what
bad
they want.
Contracts.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just So.
I mean, who have they gotten rid of that has succeeded elsewhere outside of Matthew Stafford, which was kind of out of their hands anyways? No one.
I can't name one off the top of my head.
Right. Because it's nobody. Like they didn't have talent here to even jettison. Just like you said, kind of bad contracts for not great players. So it is always important to point out the starting point, but it is also fair to wonder why they haven't made more progress in a year and a half. And again, maybe they do in the second half of the season, but we definitely have to wait it out. That's why I think you and I are firmly in the let's not do anything drastic right now. Let's not fire people 22 games into the regime. that started from the ground floor. But
that doesn't it doesn't help because like I know people get very reactionary in wanting to fire people, and I get that, I do, but at the same time, what are you replacing them with, right? Like who are you getting that you're going to bring in and that's all of a sudden going to right the ship on this team? Like I don't think that answer is there, and it's we see this a lot, like when you're getting into these rough patches where you want to make changes. I mean, you have to have you have to look like the grass isn't always greener, I guess, right? Like I guess that's the point I'm looking at is you don't always one, it's way too early, right? You haven't seen what they can do. And then two, yeah, it's just what's your plan? Like I know you're mad, so you want blood, but like what's the plan? What's the next step after you cut this the hand off this team?
Right. Who's the coach out there you're eager to hire?
I don't
promote Ben Johnson. Is that what everyone wants? I mean, after a goose egg, I'm not sure anyone even wants that. So
I'm sure not.
Yeah. All right. Next question. Let's go to, this is an interesting one. Do you think Amani's benching was a teaching moment gone wrong?
I don't know. It's hard to say. Like you brought up this point in your 8 things I know about the team article this morning, where you had said that you pointed out that Campbell said that he was benched because he didn't contribute on special teams, and at the same time, that's why he was inactive.
Right.
Yes,
he was benched for performance issues. Clearly.
But yes, he was inactive because he didn't play on special teams.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then you went on to say that how much does 6 snaps on special teams really matter?
Right.
Okay, so I get that. I wonder if there's something deeper going on here, where they've lost trust in him.
Sure.
And they felt like even Chase Lucas was going to give them a better option than what Amani was, because he has struggled the last couple of games. Now, personally, as big of a Chase Lucas fan as I am, I still think Amani is a better player.
Yeah.
But it's very possible they just lost confidence in him. And if they have, then maybe you start making phone calls. Because if you don't think he's going to play, he's just sitting there eating up cap space.
Yeah, that's interesting. Campbell made it clear on Monday that he still, like, it's not a done deal. Like, Amani can
prove himself. Yeah.
Win the job back. And he said, Amani's been a huge pro about this in terms of just, like, taking it in stride and being mature about this, and even going to him and asking, like, hey, am I benched for good now, or can I win this job back? And he was honest with him, like, yeah, you can win this back. Just got to go out and do it in practice. Now, I think that's got to be pretty hard to do, considering practices are pretty short and you only get a handful of opportunities, especially when you're not a starter. So I don't know if he ends up accomplishing that, but everything this team says about Will Harris is they trust that guy.
Yeah.
Front and back. And I mean, we haven't had a ton of sample size of Will Harris as an outside corner in the regular season this year, but a lot of it hasn't been great.
Yeah.
And so
he played better last year on the outside.
He did. But then like you said, like in training camp, it looked like, okay, he's comfortable, and then it started slipping away from him. And then he comes in, and listen, it's hard to come off the bench and then for 5 snaps and you get burned in the season opener when Okudah goes out with a cramp. Like that's a tough place to put a player in. And so maybe there needs to be a little more leniency there. But they also say very high things about Jerry Jacobs. I mean, they seem very excited about getting Jerry Jacobs back. And so the question is it going to be the Jerry Jacobs, Jeff Okudah show? And I'm starting to think the answer is yes.
I think they're gonna they're going to test him out against Will. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they're going to end up with two guys that they trust. And that makes, I mean, look, to go back to the original question, that's going to make life even harder for Oruwariye, right? So I don't know. I know you want to say it's a good problem to have, but honestly, like it's the end solutions still isn't ideal,
right? Well,
no matter who ends up starting there.
And
to be honest,
like we talk about offensive line cohesion and trying to keep that as stable as possible. There's something to be said about that in the secondary too. And I mean, we saw Certainly. It when Chase Lucas and Bobby Price had had a little bit of a meltdown there on the one touchdown pass. Like there needs to be some sort of chemistry there, and the lines have just been It's mostly injury related, so they're shaking things up because they have to. But at some point, they need to find some sort of stasis there and just go with what they have and let them grow some chemistry between them, because man, they're putting them in tough positions.
Yeah, like the split zone requires a lot of communication, and if you're changing guys up consistently, it makes that very challenging.